Well, Windsor Gardens, good evening. How are y'all doing tonight? Excellent. I am holding up best I can. Thank you for asking. I will say that campaigning and legislating in the midst of authoritarianism is absolutely the challenge of all of our lifetimes.
What were you thinking?
Here, girl. Uh, My name is Julie Gonzales, and I am a candidate for the U.S. Senate because I believe that in this moment, no one is coming to save us and that we are the ones that we have been waiting for. It is hard to tell you about what I want to do and why I want to do them without first giving you a sense about who I am and how I show up to this work. My family goes back generations down in Werfeno County, in Walsenburg and Gardner, and on my mom's side. On my dad's side, generations back in northern New Mexico. We're the old school Chicanos who, we didn't cross the border crossed us, you know? And so, but, yeah, yes. But when I was a little girl, my parents got married, and when my mom was pregnant with me, my dad got a job managing 5 different cattle ranches for the San Carlos Apache tribe. And so I was born on the reservation in San Carlos, Arizona, lived there until I was 10. And then my dad got a different job managing a different ranch, this time right on the border in South Texas. And so in the summer in between 4th and 5th grade, my family moved from Arizona down to the border. And I sound a little bit like Sarah Palin when I say that from certain parts of the ranch, you could see Mexico. But I grew up and we moved there in that summer 1993. For the history nerds in the room, you will know that in January 1994, that's when NAFTA was enacted. That allowed goods and services and products to move across borders, but did not give human beings that same ability. And so what I ended up growing up with was, even though my dad was managing a cattle ranch, this is before cell phones, my dad would often hear Border Patrol agents say, "Oh, I see some movement on some of our electronic data," because this is on CB radios, you know? And my dad would get on the radio and say, no, that we just moved cattle into that pasture. And that was how we grew up. I remember being pulled over by the Border Patrol more times than I could count. And there comes a certain point at which you wonder, at what point do American citizens actually get to be full American citizens? You know, never mind that my family had been in southern Colorado, northern New Mexico since before it was the United States. Never mind that my dad had served in the Air Force and served in Vietnam. Never mind the fact that my mom was an elementary school teacher for the school district. We constantly were having to demonstrate and reaffirm our Americanness and our ability to be here. I didn't have a vocabulary as 5-year-old Julie on the res, as 15-year-old Julie in South Texas. It wasn't until I got to Yale University that I actually began to understand how power works. And to me, there are 3 steps to it. Look, Yale University was founded in 1701, for those of y'all keeping track, the United States was founded in 1776, right? The United States of America is 75 years younger than Yale University. Talk about institutional power. And also, I think the scientific term is they have a bajillion-dollar endowment, right? Yet, when I showed up in the fall of 2001, there were 3 different strikes taking place that over the course of my 4 years at Yale University. The third strike was so tense that at a certain point, the university brought in a bunch of subcontracted workers, scabs, to try and break the strike. They were monolingual Spanish speakers, a lot of immigrant folks. Now, the union members weren't going to cross a picket line, but the university had sent those workers in to try to clean our dorms. And so we went, myself and several other students who were bilingual, we went and talked to those workers, pulled 13 workers off of the job and onto the picket line, and within days, the university settled a lasting peace and paid the workers a living wage. And I gotta say that what the lesson I learned there is that if you ain't got institutional power, if you don't have a ton of money, when you organize people, even across difference, across language, didn't matter how much money you had in your bank account, but when you came together to fight for the same values and ideals, you could win transformative and lasting change. And I gotta say, as soon as I learned that lesson, I was hooked. And I've dedicated my life to organizing everyday people ever since. Whether that's been organizing for more affordable housing, whether that's been working to ensure educational access and justice, whether that's been standing up for immigrant rights. That's what I've dedicated my life to. I did 15 years of organizing before I decided to run for the state Senate. I ran because in the aftermath of Donald Trump's first election back in 2016, I realized, well, you can go and you can protest out in front of the state capitol. You can go and protest, but you also need people inside the building who can carry those values, those ideas, and translate them into policy. That's what I've done over the past 8 years. Look, I've chaired finance, I've chaired judiciary. I'm proud of that work to stand up and defend and advance reproductive freedom here in the state of Colorado. That bill was signed into law, the Reproductive Health Equity Act was signed into law 3 weeks before the Dobbs decision was announced, because we didn't wait around to find out what was going to happen. We took action. We stood up and passed the Colorado Voting Rights Act to ensure that every eligible voter can cast a ballot free from fear and intimidation. But as proud as I am of that work, if we don't have fighters who are doing the same level of work in Washington, D.C., as the work that we are doing here in Colorado, those protections end at the state line. And so imagine my dismay when Senator Hickenlooper, not in the first Trump administration, but in the second Trump administration, he's gone and voted for 10 different Trump nominees in this second Trump administration. Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, who is now playing games with Coloradans' SNAP benefits because we're a blue state. Watching and seeing the recklessness of so many of these cabinet officials who are now going and firing entire swaths of the federal government. A disproportionate number of federal workers live here in Colorado. And so that begs the question, at what point are we going to stand up and say, you know what, centrist incrementalism had a place, but that moment is not now. That moment is not now, especially when we are witnessing the extent to which Donald Trump and his extremist MAGA allies are going forward and just trampling on our institutions, our values, and our Constitution. Y'all, thank you. We need to stand up, and we need We need Colorado leaders who will go to DC and fight for those same values that we are working to protect here at the state level. And so I gotta be honest, I launched this campaign in December because I wasn't sure. Look, I'm not interested in trying to go just see my name in the paper. That's not what this is about. I wasn't sure that there would be a path to victory. And it wasn't until I saw Aurora City Council flip, and I saw Centennial City Council and similar victories take place in Pueblo, Colorado, in Montrose, in school districts across the state, where everyday people who were willing to focus and center their work on everyday Coloradans, as opposed to standing up only for MAGA and that extremism. Once I saw that, then I said, you know what? There is a path here. Now, let me be clear. I'll just close by saying this. I am not going to outraise Senator Hickenlooper. I'm sorry, that's just the truth. Leader Schumer has gone and he handpicked Senator Hickenlooper back in 2020. You all remember, after he served as governor, he stepped up to run for president, right? And then after that didn't work, Leader Schumer voluntold him to step into this Senate race, right? And he recently was in Aspen, and he said, excuse the language, but he said being in the U.S. Senate sucks. And I'm sorry, but when it comes to doing the work to fight for our institutions, when it comes to fighting for our Constitution and the rule of law itself, that is a joy, an honor, and a privilege that we ought to go and fight for every single day. We have to be willing to both flip red seats blue, build a governing majority, but we also have to look at the caliber of leaders that we are sending to DC from the blue states. And that's why I am running. My name is Julie Gonzales. I am a candidate for the U.S. Senate, and I'd be honored to earn your support. Thank you.
Questions?
I have a question, two questions. This sign says, "This all ends when enough of us say no." I'd like to hear from you. What can we do for that? Since you're, a community organizer? Is that what you said you are? Yeah, with that, because we do go out, and we hold. I don't know if you know, we go out on Alameda and we hold our little signs, so we do that. But what else can we do? And I was at a meeting the other day, and somebody was saying that when you write emails or call senators or whatever, they really may not even get those messages. So really calling or what, that doesn't really do any good. How can you tell us the best way to help to say no?
Thank you so much for that question, because I will say that in this moment, the fact that you all have made the affirmative decision tonight to be here, there are lots of other things that you could be doing. And yet the fact that you are deciding to be here and to be involved when things are as terrible as they are is an act of solidarity and bravery in this moment. And so I just want to commend you for that. What MAGA extremists and Donald Trump and all of his allies want us to do is to give up, is to tune out, is to be disconnected and say, you know what, I just can't anymore. The antidote to authoritarianism is community. And that's why I'm so grateful for how you are showing up. And so, look, the way that I approach this work is by centering the voices and the stories of everyday people who are impacted by broken systems and broken policies. Whether that's been on advancing immigrant rights. Look, there was a time in Colorado history that both Democrats and Republicans were willing to chuck immigrants under the bus in order to score some cheap political points. I'm sorry to say it. 20 years ago, when I was organizing the big immigrant rights demonstrations that said, I am not a criminal, I am here to work, right? 75,000 people. People will say, oh, well, we didn't win. We stopped legislation that would have criminalized anybody with a felony if they gave a ride to somebody without first asking their immigration status as they were going to church. You know? Like, we stopped that back in 2006. And now, 20 years later, as we are seeing ICE murder people in broad daylight on video and then say, no, that person was a domestic terrorist. We are seeing the extent to which immigrants, in a lot of ways, are often the canaries in the coal mine, right? And if it's not immigrants, it's poor folks. If it's not poor folks, it's rural folks. People at margins are the canaries in the coal mines. And you all know how the poem goes, right? First they came for my neighbor, right? I saw a protest sign 2 Fridays ago where this high school student who had walked out and gone to Lincoln Lalma Park said, first they came for my neighbors, but I know the poem, and so I stood up and I said, heck no. That is going to be how we win. And so keep doing everything that you are doing. Keep having the conversations with folks that don't agree with you 100% of the time. Keep going out and being visible, because sometimes that person driving down the road may think I'm the only one, and then they see you and they feel that sense of community. Keep showing up to meetings like this, because that's going to be how we actually win. Also, go to your caucus, go to your precinct. Caucus for me. But thank you for the question.
We've got one more question because Amanda Gonzales is here and we don't want to cut her short, but thank you so much.
Absolutely. Please.
What's your position on providing weapons and armaments to Israel?
Thank you for the question. Look, I will say that the events of October 7th were horrific and devastating in a terrorist attack. And what I have seen over the course of the time since has been Netanyahu going and engaging in a politics that has caused more harm and more death to innocent Palestinians. Back in 2024, spring 2024, I signed on to a statement calling for a ceasefire to just stop the killing from taking place. And part of what I believe is that in this moment, everybody, Palestinians, Jews, and everybody in between who lives in Gaza, who lives in that part of the world, should have safety and self-determination. But what I cannot abide by is witnessing our taxpayer dollars going to support Israel unchecked when they are going and committing the atrocities and the genocide that they are now engaged in. Even since the ceasefire that was put into place just a few short weeks ago, we've seen over 500 more Palestinians die. And that, to me, I would support an arms embargo. And I would, to me, any nation, any state that is committing these atrocities should be held to account. What I will also say in this moment is that you all may have seen, right, the arrest and detention of Nicolas Maduro, right, the president of Venezuela. And they are making the argument, the U.S. government right now, Donald Trump and his allies are making the argument that we don't have to abide by international law. We are bringing him in on domestic drug charges. Imagine if that had happened from another government going and arresting Donald Trump and then saying that they're charging him on some other country, some other nation's drug charges. We have to abide by international laws and norms and our treaties, and we have a tremendous amount of work to do to rebuild the harm that this reckless administration has caused with so many of our allies across the world. But thank you for the question.
Thank you, Senator.